As NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has quite the to-do list in front of him. Rebound in the polls, pull the party out of its deep financial hole, and paint the NDP as a distinct alternative to Justin Trudeau's Liberals. Oh, and also win the Burnaby by-election so he can lead the party from within Parliament. Meanwhile, the MP he removed from caucus over harassment allegations now says he plans to seek the NDP nomination anyway. Singh has spent the last 3 days detailing his game plan to caucus. So what is it? And can he pull it off before the next election? Joining me now from Surrey, BC is federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Hi, Mr. Singh. It's great to see you again. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Vassie, how's it going?
Good, thank you. So you just came off an announcement where your party is calling for an emergency meeting of the Federal Standing Committee on Justice to talk about Doug Ford's use of the notwithstanding clause. Are you saying that the federal government should intervene here?
Well, what I'm saying is that we've got to defend the rights of people. And what Doug Ford has done is two things. One, it's been a reckless use of something that is really the last resort. It's a clause that should be used as a final resort, and he's using it recklessly. But more concerning is the second component is that he said that this is going to be something he's going to use more regularly. And so the reckless and repetitive use of something that should be a last resort is deeply concerning. And it's not enough to just say, I'm concerned. We're saying, listen, what I'm saying is we need to have a committee meeting where experts come together and discuss the impacts of this decision. How is that going to erode the strength of the charter? What are the implications for the rest of Canada? And this is something that we've got to do something about, and we've got to sit down and hear from the experts.
Why, though, is this an issue of federal concern? I mean, his right to use this is built into the Constitution. He's using it in the provincial legislature about a city that constitutionally, again, is under his jurisdiction.
Well, I think people are deeply concerned with, one, the recklessness of the use of this power. It's supposed to be used as a last resort, not something that should be used regularly. And it should be used in a serious manner. So there's concerns about using it for a personal vendetta against a city, and more than that, this idea of using it regularly. And what does that imply, or what is the impact of that for Canadians across this country? What are the implications? There's certainly a role for the federal government to play in addressing the impacts, looking at the impacts, studying the impacts, and then bringing people together, bringing provinces together to find out what is a way forward which will defend the rights of people so that they're not subject to this arbitrary abrogation of rights.
Do you think, though, that the federal government should look at opening up the Constitution? Like, I understand that you're saying you want them to study it, but ultimately, should they be intervening at this point to change the outcome?
Well, I think first is that we need to act. And I don't have all the specific answers about what is the way forward, but I do know that we've got to do something. And we've got to study or evaluate what are the risks to the charter if we've got a conservative government, or any government, in fact, that's saying that we're going to use the notwithstanding clause regularly and recklessly. What does that mean?
But didn't the Quebec government use it very regularly in the past?
Impact? Well, the concern is this threat to use it repeatedly. If you look at the history of Canada, over the 36 years of the Charter, it's only been used about 15 times. What Mr. Ford is saying is that he's not afraid to use it whenever he needs to at any point in time, and he's just used it now regarding the size of city council in a city in the province. I mean, that seems to me, and to a lot of people, deeply concerning. And so we've got to ask these tough questions. What are the implications of this? Does this pose a threat to the rights of people? Does this pose a threat to the Charter which has defended the rights of women, the rights of the LGBTQ community, the rights of working people, the rights to freedom of expression and freedom of thought? What are the implications if you've got a government that's saying, one, I'm going to use it over something as petty as a personal vendetta, but two, I'm not afraid to use it as much as I want, when we know over 36 years it's only been used something like 15 times. That's deeply concerning.
I want to move on to something you said during caucus this week. You were responding to a call from 68 former NDP MPs and MLAs in Saskatchewan who were calling on you to reconsider booting Erin Weir from caucus. And you said, quote, "I'm not going to change my stand because people in a position of privilege want to intimidate me." What do you mean by that?
Well, I want to make it clear that I made a decision. It was a right decision, and I believe in defending and protecting the people that work for me. I want to set a strong example for safe workplaces that are free from harassment. And people who have contributed and done a lot in Saskatchewan and have a position of privilege and power and influence and continue to use that to do good work in Saskatchewan can't use that position to then intimidate me to change my position. I've made my position clear and I stand by my decision.
You think that's what they were doing? They were trying to intimidate you? Were they not just expressing their point as people, party stalwarts, of expressing their opinion on an issue?
Well, I made it clear that I'm not going to change my position, and I stand beside my decision.
But that doesn't really answer the question. I'm asking you to you've characterized them as people of privilege who intimidated you. I mean, this is, Pat Atkinson. She's been around the NDP for a long time. She was a prominent cabinet minister in Saskatchewan. Do you really think, what are you saying when you're saying she's a position of power and she's intimidating you?
Well, I made a decision to defend people who really don't have a voice, people who have raised concerns and complaints about workplaces not being safe and having been harassed. We had someone who was found to have harassed, not an allegation, not a suggestion of an allegation. This was a finding of fact by a well-respected, reputable investigator, found that there was harassment in fact. And then we've got someone that is now not only denied it, attacked the complainant, said that it was trumped up, made some sort of excuse that this was motivated by other MPs. And I'm saying that that's not acceptable. That's not something that I'm going to stand for, that type of intimidation of someone who's come forward and found to have been harassed. And then other folks are saying that I should reconsider. No, I've made my position very clear.
Okay, let me ask you about your party heading into the next election. The Liberals were obviously meeting at the same time as your party was this week, and the Prime Minister delivered a speech there that made absolutely no mention of you or your party. Are you worried about being squeezed out of this election?
Not at all. I'm worried about people being squeezed out of the things that they need, people not being able to find housing, the fact that people in our country, millions of people can't afford medication. I'm worried about people being squeezed out, and that's what we're here to do, to make sure that people have access to housing when they need it, people have access to medication. We're focused on making sure people's lives are better.
But what does it say to you that the Liberals are concentrated on the Conservatives and literally couldn't even make a mention of your party?
I'm not worried about people mentioning me or not mentioning me. I'm worried about people following through on commitments. This Prime Minister said that there's a national crisis, but then puts forward a plan that doesn't actually see much of the funding rolled out till after the next election. That's not leadership, and that's not actually helping people who need help. I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that the Finance Minister, Morneau, has ruled out universal pharmacare. We know, and all the studies have shown, universal pharmacare, one that reduces costs for provinces and for people and provides coverage to all people, is the best way to implement pharmacare. And the Finance Minister has ruled that out. I'm deeply concerned about that. I'm not concerned whether they mention my name or the party's name. Are
you concerned about the state of your party's finances? The fact that you ended 2017 with negative net assets, of $3 million, that 7 incumbents so far are not running in the next election. I'm sure you're aware of there's a narrative out there, and I know that people in your party say that it's created by the national media, but do you share any of the concern?
Well, and objectively speaking, there was certainly problems over the past years with fundraising, and we acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. I put together a plan. We're going to rectify the situation.
Okay, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time, but I really appreciate your time, Mr. Singh. Thank you.
Thank you, Vashi.